Welcome to the Creative College Journey podcast, the place to help raise awareness on the many pathways to a creative life and education and how college might be a part of it. Because it's not where you go to school, but how you go to school that counts. Hosted by professional creative and college expert Scott Barnhardt, who is chatting with a variety of guests who have some amazing lived experiences from different universities, majors, and creative industry interests. And we hope by hearing their stories, it might help give you some inspiration to find your own creative college journey.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the first podcast back in 2024. I am excited to do something a little bit different today. Earlier in this year, I had the great fortune to be interviewed. The tables turned. I was interviewed with a great organization called School Match for You. They have this lovely podcast called Your College Bound Kid Podcast. Now, if you're in the market for college podcasts, you know this is like the podcast. They do 2 episodes a week and cover so much information in really beautiful and diverse ways. I'm a fan of that podcast and was thrilled to get the chance to collaborate with them and have a chat specifically about creative college admissions and admissions for the performing arts. So I thought I would share here on this podcast that interview. So today you're going to hear me get interviewed. Before we get into that interview, I just want to thank the amazing team at Your College Bound Kid Podcast and School Match for You, namely Mark Stucker and Dr. Lisa Rouff, who interviewed me. Go check them out. Go check out their information, their services. They're also independent educational consultants. They do full service. I love their mission or their slogan. Their slogan is, the best school is the one that brings out the best in your child. And I couldn't agree more. It's nice when you find those colleagues out in the world that are so aligned with what you do and are really student-centric and are genuinely looking out for your students' best interests, which is very exciting. And I feel I found those peers over at School Match for You. So enjoy this interview that was released on Your College Bound Kid podcast just a few weeks ago.
Hi, this is Lisa from Your College Bound Kid, and today I'm very excited to be here with Scott Barnhardt. Scott is a lifelong musical theater actor, theater maker, and educator. He most recently served as lead faculty for the Contemporary Musical Theater and Film BFA program at Husson College, Los Angeles. And before that, he was the director of musical theater at the Orange County School of the Arts. Now, he has his own college consulting firm, the Creative College Journey, in which he helps creative students in the performing arts and creative writing fields traverse the often rigorous and time-consuming application process in their area of study and find their best at college. He also hosts a podcast, The Creative College Journey, and he interviews successful performers about their path to success. Scott, that's a whole lot. You must have been very busy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So I know I just, took some stuff off your website and read it out loud, but tell us more about how your journey and how you came to be a college counselor for, kids who are going to school in the creative arts.
I mean, for so many of us, it's the long story of my own college journey. I was a Broadway-bound musical theater nerd, could see nothing but that path, and the worst thing that could have happened to me did. I didn't get into NYU. I was just like crestfallen, convinced that my career was over because a school that I had done zero research on, by the way, had said no. And then cut to, I landed at what I deemed to be a safety school that ended up being the absolute perfect match. So I sort of lucked into a match. And that match for me was a BA in theater. That was the ability to take a bunch of other classes, the ability to be close to New York City so I could start my career without being smack dab in the middle of New York City. And that really taught me that it isn't where you go to school, it's how you go to school that counts, which is sort of like the ethos of my company, which is, especially for artists, for creatives, we don't have a straight line towards our goals. We don't have a straight line towards our careers. So I've really taken what I learned from my own experience as a college student, and then also as a professional Broadway actor, as an educator. I've watched time and time again that it really is the mindset of how you approach school, and really strategic planning can make all the difference in, making those dreams actionable goals. And that's really at the core of my work. It's what I'm trying to do. And so when I was working at the Orange County School of the Arts, I was working with these really, really talented, awesome students, and watching them who sort of had everything at their disposal in terms of training and experience, watching them lose their minds going through the process. And that's where I started to build this curriculum about, specifically for creatives and for art students, how to walk through this process with a little more ease, with a little more of their autonomy intact, and understanding their goals accordingly. So it's been a long journey to get to this spot. And I think that is the creative journey, is the fact that it is winding and you do find your way there, but you have to stay persistent and resilient, and you have to have the ability to keep walking one step in front of the other.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So what kind of students are you working with right now?
Predominantly, I work with anyone who sort of falls under the umbrella of creative arts. So I work with performers, actors, musical theater. I work with dancers, musicians, visual artists, creative writers, anyone who just basically has to add an audition or an artistic supplement to their application. Those tend to be my folks. The other students I tend to work with are students who are maybe more interested in an academic major, but want an artistic experience as well. And so helping them find schools that maybe they could either double major or minor in an artistic field, or maybe a school that has a lot of, extracurricular student-run programs that are of interest. So those are for the more academic-leaning students. I try to build plans and identify matches for them as well. The kids who add the A to STEAM, that are really interested in creative work within, maybe some STEM fields.
That's great. So, you kind of mentioned that you got a BA, and I'm imagining some of these more academically focused kids would be pursuing a BA. So what is the difference between a BA and a BFA? And kind of who should go to what major, would you say?
We'll be right back.
Hey, are you the proud parent of a high school junior or sophomore who is also an aspiring artist or creative? Do you worry that maybe your child's artistic passion might hinder their chances at getting into a dream college? Look no further than the Creative College Journey. This is a service designed to help guide your child through the college application process. We understand the unique challenges that come with being an artistic applicant, and we are dedicated to ensuring that your child's application stands out from the rest. From portfolio review to essay editing and understanding the ins and outs of pre-screens, we offer a range of personalized services to suit your child's needs. Now, don't let the college application process overwhelm you and your child. Feel free to sign up for the Creative College Journey today and take the first steps towards a successful artistic future. Visit our website, www.creativecollegejourney.com, to learn more and start your journey today. I love this question because it's probably the most common question I get in this field is like, well, BFA is better, right? And to be clear, they are just different degrees. One is not necessarily better than the other. A BFA is a Bachelor of Fine Arts. A BA is a Bachelor of Arts. the quickest way to sort of differentiate them is a BFA is going to be a little more prescriptive and a little more course requirements for a BFA for that degree are going to be more in line with the major. So if you're a musical theater performance major, a big portion, maybe 60-70% of your classes are going to be directly in line with musical theater performance. Then you'll have your, whatever your school liberal arts requirements are, and maybe a handful of electives. But it's going to be a more prescribed road. And generally, they are built as pre-professional programs with some intent towards, professional entry. A BA is a more exploratory degree, meaning maybe 30 or 40% of your classes are going to be in line with your major, plus your liberal arts requirements, plus some more electives or some more wiggle room. So you're going to get the chance to take other courses. So to me, the difference is really a BA is going to be more exploratory. A BFA is going to be a little more prescribed. If you have a curious mind, BAs can be great options. And I think, especially my actors out there, I sometimes think there's a little bit of the scarcity mindset that I have to get into every acting class ever in order to prove that I'm a good actor, that I can become a professional actor. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think so long as you are continuously training and conscientious about your training, you don't have to take it all in these next 4 years. Like, this is a career that you are a lifelong learner. If you're signing up to be a professional actor, you're signing up to be a lifelong learner. So I like to let students sort of think about, how might that religion class really influence your performance? How might that extra philosophy or history class, or maybe you have a significant interest in another topic, how can that Venn diagram come together? I think for the art students, that can be really magical. So the other thing is, if a student is interested in double majoring or minoring, like seriously interested in that, considering BA programs is of high interest because you tend to have a lot more overlap in terms of the course requirements. So it's like, even if you're Broadway or bust like me, like I was, I wanted to sing, dance, and act all day, every day. I benefited so greatly being in a BA and getting I didn't actually get a minor in business, but what presumably was, I took the courses that could have been a minor in business. That helped me as I was basically a young entrepreneur selling my wares, meaning me as an actor. That was so beneficial. Some of the best classes I took were outside of my major, and I was really grateful that I had that much exposure to outside courses. So that's like the long and short of how to decipher between BA or BFA. But the big key is that one is not necessarily better than the other.
Yeah, I think that's great to know, because I think you're right. People think, I have to go get a BFA. I'll never make it in my chosen field. And what you're telling us is, it might actually help you to branch out a little bit and become more well-rounded academically, or pursue other interests as well as, your art.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, because it's, we as artists, we're the barometer of what's going on in our world. So if you're knowledgeable about the world, if you are studied in other topics, it makes you a more interesting artist. You bring that to the page or the stage or the canvas in such more interesting ways. And I've seen that create success for people and traction for people, because they just have something to say. And that's what we want our artists to do. We want them to say something about the world. So I'm biased because I went through a BA, but if you have any academic inklings, I definitely consider BAs as well as BFAs in your college list.
Okay. So now for creative applicants, they have to go through some extra steps, right? So can you walk us through some of the special and fun things that they get to do in addition to the regular fun of applying for college?
So it's everything that every other academic student has to do for college. And so, on top of all of the application needs, all the essays, most creative and performing arts students, they also have to do an art supplement. And for actors particularly, they have to go through a process called a pre-screen, where they have to film full auditions. Sometimes these videos, this is up to like 10 minutes of footage that you have to submit. For like the musical theater kids, it's sometimes 2 songs, 2 monologues, a dance, a wild card video. You have to submit all of that, usually in the month of November. So the timeline is pushed for a creative applicant often. They have to submit all of that information, plus their, regular academic admission stuff. Click send, then they wait to hear if they get a callback. So then sometime in December, I'm generalizing the timeline, sometime in December, early January, they get notification whether or not they've moved to the next round, and then they're invited to in-person auditions, or sometimes virtual auditions, or sometimes considered on tape. But they are then asked to then go through another round of auditions. And it's what I try to let people know why it's different and why sometimes some extra support is needed for these students is these 17, 18-year-olds are putting themselves on the line, right? Artists identify with themselves and their work. It's hard to get a no or a rejection from a school when it's about you, when it's about you walking in the room and then they go, not so much. Even though the no is valid. The no is the numbers game. The no is what we're dealing with. But I watch students internalize these no's, these rejections in ways that become really detrimental to their, future lives and their future creative pursuits. And it stops them dead in their tracks before they've even begun. And that's really what I try to work on is not let people make these rejections or no's become their identity. The way I did, I was convinced my career was over because NYU said no. No, NYU said no because I wasn't it for them. That's cool. But it took many years to figure that out. And I'm trying to get in front of some of these students ahead of time so that they can make plans accordingly and realize you could follow an academic path and still become a professional actor. You could go straight to the industry and become a professional actor. Like there are so many ways towards a creative life. And that's what I find a lot of parents have a hard time with because again, it's not linear. I have parents who go like, I could get my kid into med school. What is this BFA in acting nonsense? What is this? And it just requires a different level of support and a little bit of breath, a little bit of breathing through the wildness of the process.
Right. And I mean, in addition to all the emotional stuff, I mean, it's probably expensive maybe if you have to go travel to different schools in person. Oh, and also it's not only just expensive, it's time, right? Just time to get to all these different auditions. So that's hard to plan.
Yeah. And I think that's the sort of secret of when you're going through the BFA process, often because the schools are hyper competitive. I mean, you're looking at programs that are taking, 15 to 30 students a year and getting hundreds, if not thousands of applicants every year. You're dealing with a lottery. You're dealing with high risk numbers. And so a lot of families will sort of start with going, well, let's apply to all of them. Let's apply to 40 schools. And I see it happen. And it becomes this law of diminishing returns where they are scattered so thin in terms of what they're after because they just want an acceptance that they actually net their overall average of what they net, it lowers. It's wild watching that happen because I do think you want to be a little more strategic about the schools you're applying to and why. Making sure your bandwidth is accurate. If you are doing 5 pre-screens, 10 pre-screens, 15 pre-screens, you have to account for the time accordingly. Same thing in terms of in-person auditions. If you're applying to 30 schools across the nation, and let's say everything goes great and you clear all your pre-screens, now you have to plan 30 live auditions over the course of about 6 weeks, which becomes a giant headache in terms of travel, cost, expense, also just sort of removing you kind of from high school for those number of weeks. So I always want families to sort of understand what they're undertaking when they're applying to so many schools. And I think there are ways to hedge your bets in a smarter way rather than just doing the shotgun approach where you're just applying to as many as you can in the spirit of, well, I just need to get into one. Because not all schools are built the same from a creative point of view.
Yeah, no, my daughter's good friend from high school did that. I think I mentioned that to you when we were speaking earlier. And she wasn't around for like almost all of her senior year in fall and early winter. And then it was COVID, so that was the end of the year. You know, and so she really kind of missed out on that. And she, of course, ended up at a great program, but it was just exhausting to watch. I can't even imagine what it was to do. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that was part of what I experienced as, you know, a high school of the arts administrator and director was like, I was watching these students sort of miss out on major parts of their senior year because of the commitments they were making towards their college pursuits. And I think there's a balance that can be struck. I think it is a major undertaking to go into these highly competitive programs and apply to them and give them your best shot. I think that requires a lot of time and commitment and seriousness, but I watch it sort of spill over into scarcity and this fear-based model that, if I don't get into one of these, you know, quote unquote elite performing programs, then it's over for me. And that's what I try to help people avoid.
Yeah. So how do you help people like be more strategic and narrow things down a little bit?
Yeah. So the one thing a few things that I do. One is I really try to identify the creative driver in a student and maybe even a family. Like, what is the thing these students generally spend crazy amounts of hours at school, you know, doing their art form or putting in all this extra time. You know, you talk to a theater kid and they will easily be spending an extra 40 hours a week at school just to be a part of the school play. And so while there's a natural idea that you're like, from that, well, then I should go study that in theater. I think there's sometimes a missing conversation of like, what's driving their want to be a part of this? Is it that they want to become a better performer? Is it that they want to become famous and rich? Is it because they just like the people? Is it because they want to be an activist and change the world? Is it like there are some drivers that are sort of underneath their actions? And if you can start to identify those, you can then use that information to start to find really great matches for the student. Like, if a student just likes being around the theater folk and wants to keep it going, Juilliard's probably not a great spot for that kid, right? Yet the parents might Google best theater programs for, you know, in America, and Juilliard's going to come up number one on the list. That doesn't mean it's a match. So it's trying to find really holistic, solid matches. You know, the other big thing is balancing a list, is understanding the numbers, what schools are genuine pie in the sky reach schools, which ones are you actually interested in, you know, looking at their curriculum, looking at what their output is, and then finding some more targets and likelies that are in line with whatever the dream reach school is. Making sure that the numbers make sense, making sure the financial numbers make sense, given a family's need. Considering state schools, considering community college options. I do like to have a family like really consider multiple options at their disposal. What's their direct to industry route? What would they do if the student didn't go to college and just went straight to the industry? How would you handle that? What would happen if they went to community college? What would happen if they went to a state school? What would happen if they went to a dream private school? And sort of let all of the options be awesome. Let all of the options be something that they can be stoked about. Because I think for the creative, if you really look at it, there are many, many ways towards this path. And again, really identifying the student's workload. I can see when students get, if a student leans in overwhelmed and they don't have the bandwidth to take on this extra work, it's not the time to take on this kind of extra work. In many ways, that's where you start to consider a gap year. You start to consider maybe you apply one round with 2 or 3 schools, and then the next year consider adding more. And this is where it really becomes case by case, where you have to look at each student and each family in terms of what they need, what their interests are. But it's about getting down to brass tacks of like what drives the student creatively and what could work given the student's interests.
Yeah, I really love when you said let all the options be awesome, because I think even in regular academic college counseling, we're always saying like love every school on your list, because they all have great opportunities, but sometimes that's a hard sell, because people have these preconceived notions, and I'm sure you run into with your creative families. Oh, this is the only way. So I love that you're giving them all these different options to think about. That's where your freedom in the process lies, is knowing, like, I'm a great artist, and no matter which one of these 4 or 5 routes I take, I can get to where I want.
And that's probably the biggest mistake I see families and students walking into this process is they're walking in waiting for the school to validate them as an artist. And a school is not a gatekeeper to that. That is internal. That is only you. So realizing that, I could go to community college and train privately, right? I could go work with a literal Hollywood coach or a Broadway vocal coach for the same cost. Like, there are so many ways to slice and dice this, that you can negotiate your way to a lot of ideas. And especially for any price conscious families out there, it's really understanding the investment and really understanding, if there are limitations. Creatives live for a limitation. Put me in a theater, give me $100 and a ball of twine, and we'll figure something out. We'll put on a show. That is what we do. So living within limitations isn't a bad thing, and it shouldn't be considered. And I watch families sort of presume on some level, if they can't afford a private 4-year institution, then they are limiting their child's dreams. And it's just not true. It's just not true. And the students have to be trained in that regard too, is to realize, nope, there are many ways towards this goal.
So if a student, let's say, wants to be on Broadway, and you're on Broadway, so you can probably speak quite well to this, they don't look at your college resume and be like, oh, look at that A, this kid got in tap dance 3. I mean, they want to see what you do, right? I mean, they're not looking at your educational history.
And there is truth that there are certain schools that have very strong industry pipelines. There are schools like, University of Michigan and NYU, Boston Conservatory. There are schools that are known for their sort of pipeline. And what I always say is, like, a college might get you in the door. It might open a door or two. But at the end of the day, when you're in that audition, it's what do you deliver? What can you do the job? And again, it goes back to, like, in terms of this consumerism, you bring a skill set to a show. Does your skill set fill what the show needs? It is transactional. So in that, it's always trying to get people to realize, like, no one cares where you went. They just care, can you do the job?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think having families realize that'll also be really freeing. So what kind of preparation do students have to put into these pre-screens and auditions? That sounds really time-consuming and expensive. Is that okay?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, for example, I'm very well versed in sort of like musical theater. And it's sort of like musical theater, I always say, is like the gauntlet. It's the most intensive of the art forms out there, I think. Outside of maybe filmmaking, where you often have to create unique films for applications. But for musical theater, we'll use this as an example. You have to have at least two contrasting songs. So with that, it's actually sometimes, depending on the requirements, like 2 to 4, because you may need a post 1970 song and a pre 1970 Broadway song, and they need to be contrasting. So maybe one up tempo, maybe one ballad. So with that, you're really looking like 2 to 4 songs. You're looking for 2 to 3 60 to 90 second monologues. 2 of those contemporary, post 1900, sometimes post 1940 or 1950, and then 1 classical, pre 1900. So that's intense. Just already that alone, and filming them. I like to say have students film at home because you have more chances to do them. There is something to hiring someone and setting up your shots in a studio, but then you're on a clock. You're sort of on a timer to get the shot and to get a good take. And I think that's actually harder than it sounds. So I often like have clients work on takes over the period of a month, 6 weeks, where we'll try different things, even from afar, and we'll talk about what's working, what's not, and strengthen their takes as they go. There's then a dance component often where you have to film a choreographed dance up to 60 to 90 seconds. And then the added piece is the wild card, where you then have to do, I always say it's like MTV Cribs. It's like a Dear Diary video diary. It's like, hey, this is me. It's something that has nothing to do with your life as an artist. And that I actually really enjoy because you can really be creative. You can have a ton of fun with that. But it also stresses people out because it's like, I can do anything. What do I do? So all of those things have to be prepared, as well as an artistic resume, as well as any additional artistic supplemental essays that can come along. So on top of what any STEM student has to do, then all of this has to be added. So timeline-wise, I like artistic students to have a running list by May, June, like a strong, close to final list. Prepping materials over the summer significantly, like choosing all of your materials by June and July, and then start filming as early as September for those November 1 deadlines.
Wow, that's amazing. So if you apply to a BA program, do you have to go through the same level of rigor in terms of your submitting?
It depends on the program. Some BAs do require an audition, many don't. So it really sort of varies. And then there's also some BFA programs that you don't get into until your sophomore or junior year, where you apply as almost like a regular regular admit student, and you're sort of automatically joined in a BA or a certain kind of BFA program, and you're not inducted into the BFA performance track until you've gone through a certain amount of classes, so there are some different options, but there are, like, the UCLA BA in theater program does require a pre-screen, and then sometimes an interview. So they don't necessarily have in-person auditions, but they do have sort of an interview process. And I think of like a school like my alma mater, Wagner College, which is a BA, which does require an audition, but there were no pre-screens. So it varies. And often with the BA programs, there is an audition for additional merit scholarships. So some of the schools that I love, University of Northern Colorado, I've had a lot of students go there. I also like them because they have a theater education program, as well as a BFA in musical theater, and there are ways to double major in both. I'm also a fan. I love 2 professors who are at this school, Northern Michigan University, which is way, way up in northern Michigan. I mean, it's almost off the map, northern Michigan. But Jimmy Ludwig and Kristen Beth Williams are Broadway veterans that are at that school, and I would send anyone to train with them. So the fact that that's just like one of those places that to consider, to like highly consider, because there are great people teaching there who can teach you the skills that you're after. I also love adding University of Utah to people's lists. It's got a big school vibe. It definitely has like the football games, the huge school atmosphere, and they have a really lovely theater program that is very open access, lots of opportunities. They also have a theater education program that is lovely. I had a student who went from the BFA in musical theater to theater education because she was drawn to it. And I had another student who was at University of Utah who's worked in 4 or 5 professional productions at Pioneer Theater, which is a professional theater that is on campus. So it's a great opportunity. And because it's also part of WUI, the Western Undergraduate Exchange, the tuition is chef's kiss in comparison to a lot of the other options. For in-state here in California, I think the hidden gem that people don't consider is Chico State. And Chico State has a really interesting history with theater, and I love shouting out Chico State.
That's fabulous. Those are some great tips. So we always ask guests on the podcast what advice they have for parents, students, and for college counselors. So let's start off with parents. What advice do you have for us parents?
For the parents, I would definitely say let the student drive this. Like, this should be, I always say 80-20. 80% should be driven by the student, 20% by, coaches, parents, counselors. If it's not at that ratio or thereabouts, pump the brakes. And it's okay to pump the brakes. You're not in a rush. And I know there is just this feeling, especially in some like competitive schools, the keeping up with the Joneses about where you go to school or getting that Instagram post. I really say, really listen to your student. Are they ready for this? Are they ready for this next step? And especially for the creative students, really consider what are your multiple options. And you get to be the modeler of, can they be stoked about this? Can they be stoked about a community college option? Can they be stoked about a straight to industry option? Be teammates. So that would be my biggest advice for parents.
Yeah, that's great advice. And especially with something like a creative field, like that's a very personal thing that a student has to put their whole self into. If they don't want to do it that way, or they're not ready to do it, like that would be very hard. And I know a lot of times parents, we all have our ambitions, and we have, those snotty neighbors that keep making like comments about your kid because they were just like the second lead in the play and not the first or whatever. But we kind of have to try to transcend all that and just get focused on what they want.
That's exactly right.
To that kid and what they want. So what advice do you have for students?
For the students, it's really all about realizing that where you go to college does not define your future. Like, that should be the mantra before every audition, before clicking send on every application. It's not to say that you shouldn't want it. It's not to say that you shouldn't work hard for it, but it's so much about being an artist is about process and honoring your process and figuring out your process. So the same happens here. Like, and with that, it's also letting them know this is a subjective field. There is bias in this field. There is implicit outward bias in this field, and you are actively stepping into that. So with that realization, in order to keep your autonomy and keep your power as an artist, you really do have to realize that you will be okay if you get a rejection. You'll be okay if you get an acceptance. Your job is just to figure out the next right step. regardless of what happens. And that it's always the biggest like aha that I get from students and clients once they're in college. I got the greatest email from a former student. I think it was his second semester at Texas State in their musical theater program, which is also a great, great program. And he wrote me, Mr. Barnhardt, dude, it's just more school. I was like, you're right. It's not a magical unicorn. It's just more school.
Oh, that's great.
And I love hearing that it's just a place to learn. That it's really not as high stakes as it is, even at those industry pipeline schools. It's not some secret sauce. It's just more school.
That's a great thing. All right. So what about for college counselors? What should we be thinking about or doing?
Yeah, I think for the college counselors, I feel like when you deal with a creative student, find the yes and. Like, find the way to affirm the creative impulse while still also getting underneath the motivator. Because I think a lot of people just sort of naturally, our society sort of has this idea that if you're going to become a creative, you are signing up for a life of destitution. You're going to be drunk at noon, like you're signing up for this life of poverty. And we know that's actually not true. And in fact, the skill sets you learn in a creative major are very often now the skill sets that are becoming the most desirable in a world of AI. You're looking for people who can read context clues. You're looking for people who communicate well, who have empathy, who have the ability to see through data in a compassionate, empathetic way. So try not to get to the finish line of like, but getting on Broadway is hard. They're just signing up for a selection of courses. So I think some counselors, maybe not, it's a bit of a generalization, but I think they fear what they don't know in terms of creative majors. And they know it's competitive and it gets overwhelming. So they can sometimes, maybe discourage that pursuit. But that being said, it's finding the yes and sort of figuring out the pathways and the actual matches for a student and fully acknowledging there's some specialized information in this particular world that would be worthwhile seeking out those who have that information.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been amazing, but you're not done yet because no guest of the college fellowship really gets to get away without being on the hot seat, where we get to learn more fun facts about you. So my first question is that, you've been an entertainer for much of your life. I know you in several Broadway shows, including The Book of Mormon, which is one of my absolute favorites. And the one that I always say that Mark Stucker should never, ever, ever go to see.
No, definitely.
Definitely not. But what do you like to be entertained by? What do you do to get your own artistic fix?
Oh, that's such a good question. The first thing I love watching people make things. So I love shows. I mean, I love theater always, but I love sort of getting the inside look of, so like any making reality shows, like RuPaul's Drag Race, Live For, because they're literally making stuff they're so creative all the time. Great British Bake Off, absolutely. Blown Away, there was a glass blowing competition show that I love. So like often it's like watching people make things I find deeply entertaining.
That's fantastic. Now, if you could travel anywhere in the world, like what's on your bucket list you haven't been able to get to yet?
I think the like bucket list place I want to travel to, and it's because of a 7th grade Spanish class, is Iguazu Falls, which is in South America. I literally learned about it in 7th grade and have always wanted to go. And that's still on my bucket list.
Yeah. My rest of my family is gone. I didn't get to go because we all went to Argentina to visit our old babysitter, and I had to stay with the baby. In Buenos Aires.
No.
But they loved Iguazu Falls. They said it was absolutely mind-blowing. But if you do go, Luciana, our old babysitter, lives right near there, and I'm sure she'd be happy to show you around. She is fabulous.
I'm going to look you up when we're ready to make those travel plans.
Lucy spoiled us for all babysitters. When she went back to Argentina, we could never find anyone as good as her again.
Oh, my gosh.
So, and then what's the latest good book that you've read, or the recent, most, not necessarily the latest, but the recent vintage that you've read?
So this is for any business solopreneur people out there. This is little nerdy deep cut, but Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. It changed the game for me in terms of how I look at my numbers, how I look at my budgeting, and it was literally a game-changing book in terms of figuring out how to start my own business.
That's so interesting. And so what is the elevator pitch? Like, what one sentence summary of what his point is?
So it's basically a way of accounting where you literally separate every dollar that comes in into 4 separate accounts. Your taxes, your profit, your owner's compensation, and your operating expenses. And so you build out a sort of percentage and map it out. So you can literally look at the health of your business every time you look at your bank account. And I love that you can truly see how you're doing and where you need to shore up, where you need to fix things. It's a really smart way to just look at numbers and know, like, oh, this was a slow month, and it's not theoretical, it's literal in your bank account. And it's been so helpful for me.
I'll have to check that out, because that sounds like, when I think about like bank accounts and, I'm not a numbers person, but I think that I could get my mind around, categories.
And I think that's why I liked it too, because I can get into a spreadsheet. Don't get it twisted. I do love a spreadsheet. I literally have on my desk, keep calm. I have a spreadsheet for that from a parent who was very happy with some of the spreadsheets I gave. But I think because it's such a snapshot, it's such an easy way to digest the information that you thereby make good business choices because of that constant flow of information.
That's fantastic. Well, you have just been chock full of great advice, knowledge, wisdom, and wit. It's been such a pleasure having you here on the podcast.
Oh, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for having me. I love this podcast. You guys are doing great work.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think we do share, like this general motto of it's not where you go to college, it's what you do while you're there. And you really emphasize that in so many different ways, especially in the field of performing arts. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, great. Well, thanks
Love
so
it.
much.
Thank you. Well, that was the interview. I just want to take this moment again to thank Dr. Lisa Rouff for organizing and recording this interview with me. I also certainly want to thank Mark Stucker and the entire team over at School Match for You. Head over to their website, schoolmatch, 4, U.com, or you can find their amazing podcast, which literally has so many experts and schools that you've never heard of that you should hear about. It's a really wonderful resource that you should have in your back pocket. You can look that up anywhere podcasts are available. Your College Bound Kid podcast. They use the acronym YCBK a lot. So put either of those where you listen to podcasts and you should be good to go. That's another interview episode of the Creative College Journey podcast. We hope this episode that featured an interview with me was beneficial to you, and want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to listen. If you are in need of some encouragement, guidance, and inspiration for your college journey and would like to work with Scott, don't hesitate to head to our website, www.creativecollegejourney.com, to schedule a free, no obligation 1-hour consultation to find out the many ways the Creative College Journey can help you on your path. You can also find Scott Barnhardt on Instagram at Scott Barnhardt. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really does help others find us. And be sure to come back in the coming weeks for more discussions about creative college admissions, lowering the temperature on the process, and the many industry pathways and transferable skills that a creative education and life can offer. Don't forget, it's not where you go to school, but how you go to school that counts. Thank you.